So to start this year, it hasn't been great for Sony in terms of overall PR. I mean, the system itself continues to sell very, very well, despite there being overall shortages in supply, especially with the chip shortage and all of this going on now. But Sony continues to do well when it comes to sales for the PlayStation 5, but I think a lot of us have noticed there are a lot of changes going on at Sony. Naturally, we know Sean Layden kind of just left. We're still waiting to hear that story, and that'll be interesting now, especially with this new report that's come out that is talking about some of the inner workings at Sony. And I wanted to go over that here today. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave Plus channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So you can see the headline here, this from Bloomberg by Jason Schreier, and I'll link to this article down in the description, where it says Sony's obsession with blockbusters is stirring unrest within PlayStation empire. Now, a lot of this article seems to follow two different studios that had different stories going on within Sony, and kind of the clashing ideas that Sony had before versus what they have now. Before, we would get smaller games along with their bigger games, right? So, we get like the Japan studio style games where we get Gravity Rush or maybe like a Sly Cooper or something like that throughout the years of PlayStation, dating back to PlayStation 2. But as we got further and further along, those kind of games got left behind, and now we get these big AAA blockbuster style games. The Last of Us, Ghost of Tsushima, Horizon, God of War, and you know what? They've worked. They've all sold well, and they've all worked to move units along, leading the PS4 upwards of 120 million units. However, it does appear that Sony's focus continues to shift more in that direction, which to me is leading to a much more conservative Sony. And this article just continues to double down on that thought. So within Sony, there is a division called Visual Arts Service, and they mostly work to help games get to the finish line for different things, animations, polish, things around the game itself. Like, for example, when Last of Us Part 2 got delayed, they came in to help get that game done and out in 2020. But they had an idea to go back and do something as more or less the lead developer, which would be a remake of Last of Us. And I heard this looking through the article. I'm like, do they really need to remake Last of Us? Because while it was obviously something that came out on the PS3 in 2013, and who knows, maybe this project, which apparently is codenamed T1X, doesn't come out until, say, 2023 or something. That'd be 10 years apart. We can already play the game on our PS5. Sure, it is the PS3 version that was remastered for the PS4, but the game still plays well enough. Their other idea was to go back and grab Uncharted, which is a bit older than The Last of Us, and that game actually could use some work to more or less modernize it, and that could have been a very interesting remake. But apparently that one would have cost a bit too much money. In fact, Herman Holst comes in and mentioned, wait, why is this remake costing us so much money? Why is the budget so large for this? And basically the story goes that it's slowly shifted away from what we have here with Visual Arts Service and into Naughty Dog's control, to the point where Visual Arts Service went back to their former role of just supporting a project that they had started. Anyway, after a lot of that happened, apparently most of the original personnel at Visual Arts Service just kind of disbanded and even left Sony. There's apparently a running joke with the end of this article that mentions that the people who are left over from Visual Arts Service are jokingly referred to as Naughty Dog South, as they're mostly there running support on this project for a Last of Us remake that a lot of people online are still asking why we really need. But let's face it, it will sell well. Like, they'll announce it, people will get excited because it'll look really good, and sure, it'll probably play much more like what we have with Last of Us Part 2, which, despite all of the backlash to the story, most people played it and the gameplay is good. So yes, a Last of Us remake comes out, it will sell very, very well, especially next to something like this this series that we're going to be getting through a streaming service, and then we'll probably see the multiplayer come out, some sort of faction spin-off. So a lot of Last of Us stuff coming up to kind of complement the series. And then the article shifts over to a story for Bend Studio and their pitch for Days Gone 2 that was denied by Sony. And this is an interesting one because while I wasn't the biggest fan of Days Gone, I'm not going to pretend like I was really into the game or anything. It was at least average, right, for the game itself. It came out, got review scores. I think it was like in the mid 70s. And it was actually profitable. Like, it sold well enough to where it made Sony money, but there's an interesting mindset, it appears, at least that's being shown with this article for Sony now. It comes down to, look, it's got to be a high 80s or low 90s with these Metacritic scores. Apparently, like, Metacritic seems to play in almost as much or even more to how much money the game makes Sony. Like, there is an image that Sony is trying to put out there right now, and that is that when Sony comes out with a game, the world stops and it notices because it is going to be that good of a game. And I actually don't have a problem with that mindset, mostly because that means that we should get these really high quality games from these different developers at Sony that clearly have a ton of talent. And that also tells me they probably won't rush a game out just for the sake of releasing it. But interestingly enough, what happened with Bend Studios is they were moved over to Naughty Dog to help them with a project that they were working on, one being a multiplayer game, the other one being an Uncharted game. And it got to the point where they were concerned that they might end up being absorbed into Naughty Dog. There's not much in terms of details around how this went down, but apparently Bend Studio, or at least some of the leaders there, went to Sony and said, we want to be taken off this project because we don't want to just end up becoming part, like a branch of Naughty Dog and work on their games. We want to work on our own project. And the good news here is, according to the report, Bend Studio is now working on a brand new game and a new franchise. So couldn't do Days Gone 2. I guess Sony just doesn't see the overall value in that IP for it to warrant a sequel. Rather, we'll try something new. And I don't mind that. Just see what Bend Studio comes up with after maybe learning quite a bit from what happened with Days Gone. Well, I would like to say it's a strange thing for Sony to just say we don't want a sequel to Days Gone, even though it was profitable. There's a lot of things we probably don't know about that project. Like, it's very possible that the development was really bad for that game. It might have been all over the place, might have been a lot of clashing opinions, and it could have just been overall messy. Because while we'll see the finished product, like something God of War, for example, 2018 comes out, Game of the Year. People absolutely love this game. If you go back and watch the documentary, Raising Kratos, that game was kind of a mess at times in development. There appeared to be points where they were unsure if the game would even get finished and come out. When Shuhei shows up, plays the game, and doesn't like it, yeah, there's a lot of doubt cast on that project, but it turned out to be a great game overall. One of my favorites from the PlayStation 4 era, but development wasn't exactly smooth on that one. Now, there's a quote I want to quickly read from this article with Sony and their Japan studios, where it says, Sony's focus on exclusive blockbusters has come at the expense of niche teams and studios within the PlayStation organization, leading to high turnover and less choice for players. Last week, Sony reorganized a development office in Japan, resulting in mass departures of people who worked on less well-known but acclaimed games such as Gravity Rush and Everybody's Golf. The company has informed developers that it no longer wants to produce smaller games that are only successful in Japan, Bloomberg has reported. Now, I'm looking at this, and it's pretty clear that Sony is not interested in having a budget for a game like a Gravity Rush and Everybody's Golf, a Sly Cooper, right? These kind of games are just going to be left behind in Sony's back catalog. Maybe eventually we get to a point where they do run alongside of it with, I don't know, something with backwards compatibility. That's always possible, but I don't think we're ever really going to see a new Sly Cooper. Right? Like, that's just not going to be in the cards. Instead, it seems like they want to take a lot of their resources and push it towards these big AAA games. My only issue with that is how many of those can you actually release in a generation and not make it feel like there are these large holes in releases? Like, there's going to be times where, I mean, much like now, where not a lot of stuff's coming out for the PlayStation 5 from Sony. Sure, Returnal's coming up, but people are looking past that one completely to Ratchet and Clank. Does that mean for some there's going to be like this serious gap between release in November with something like Demon's Souls and Spider-Man Miles Morales all the way until the following June for the next big game from Sony? Or are we going to have one game a year from Sony if it's these big AAA projects that, let's face it, take 4, 5, maybe 6 years to complete when they start over with the development cycle. So that's my one concern. Taking away those smaller AA games, as people like to call them, will leave spots where not a lot's going on. And that's sort of why I think we're seeing Sony be very aggressive with these third-party deals like Final Fantasy 16. There's the rumors around them making deals with Konami for a Silent Hill and even a Metal Gear Solid. And I think there are also others that we don't know about aside from the confirmed and the rumored now. And that's just kind of Sony's strategy. Release big time games where people can say, okay, when Sony is coming out with something, we need to pay attention, and then not drop the price on these games. Because Demon's Souls, that's still $70. They haven't dropped the price. So I think what you're going to see, big AAA games come out once a year, maybe from Sony, maybe twice if they end up getting these close enough to each other throughout a generation, right, in a year. And the prices don't depreciate as fast as they have in the past, and third-party games that are bought up and exclusive to the Sony platform and the PS5. And as much as I'm probably going to miss games like a Gravity Rush or an Everybody's Golf, people didn't really buy them. And so Jim Ryan's going to look at that and say, well, there's no point in making him. He's a numbers guy. He's a businessman. He would rather take the money that it took to create a new Gravity Rush and just jam it into more development time and resources for the next Horizon or the next God of War, because those will provide exponential return rather than possible losses. It's an interesting strategy from Sony, and we'll see how it works throughout this generation, because on the opposite side, Microsoft appears to be more or less embracing the idea of smaller games alongside of bigger titles. So we're going to see how this works out for either side, whether it's Microsoft with having a bunch of releases back to back to back to back, or Sony having some really good big time releases maybe once or twice a year. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below, with this article being posted to Bloomberg, giving us a bit of an insight into what's happening at Sony and some of the changes and the different things that are happening from these personnel shifts. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.